Let's talk about then probably the most famous action scene in Die Hard and maybe one of the most famous scenes in action movies. So McClane's heading up to the roof to figure out what Hans is planning with all those explosives. He sees the truth and he leaps into action, and there's this real escalation now because Carl finds him and takes his gun, and there's this personal brawl between the two of them.
We're both professionals. This is personal.
And apparently they barely use stuntman, and you can kind of see it here. John's a brawler, he fights dirty. And it ends with John hanging him from chains.
Not killing him, though.
No.
You can survive hanging from chains, apparently.
Yeah.
I mean, he does have his hands
For
sort
the right
of
amount of money.
tucked cleverly. You have to pay a lot, actually.
but a little later.
It's not
It's
cheap.
skilled work. Do you know what
I mean,
why should it be free?
And you'd want a professional doing it. Let me tell
Absolutely.
you, to actually take any pleasure from
Not
it.
something to do with amateurs.
You need to know that they know what they're doing, and you need a safe word.
Otherwise, it's a really different
You need
experience.
a safe word.
But a little later, the hostages
Something
are coming
short.
down.
Just something short.
Not the tagline from the post.
Yeah, mine is Scheiß auf das Fenster. Scheiß auf das Fenster.
There's a lot happening here. Hans sees the kids on the telly and realises that Holly is Mrs. McClane at the same time as John is fighting Carl, and the FBI is approaching in their choppers, and they say we can live with losing 25% of the hostages.
Yeah, it's great.
It's like they're like the terrorists, though. They don't care about collateral damage.
Yeah.
So there's the similarities there. They spent 6 months planning this chopper approach. They had 9 camera crews. They had 2 hours and 3 goes to shoot it on a Sunday evening. And McTiernan said he was terrified because it was so dangerous when that helicopter was flying next to those actors on the roof. That was all really happening in downtown LA. And he said anything could have gone wrong.
Well, my favourite is that the LAPD told Joel Silver that they could not bring those helicopters in on the deck, as it was written in the script. They couldn't fly low down the streets of Los Angeles. And Joel Silver went, absolutely. I will, of course, not do that. We'll keep well above 1,500 feet. And then to the helicopter pilots, he went, bring them as low as you possibly can go.
It's like fucking Saigon! It's like...
And flew them in really low. And the thing was, once they get to the top of the building, like the thing on everyone's mind was this was still quite close to the horrible accident with Victor Moreau and the kids on the set of the Twilight Zone movie. And so that was going through everyone's head when the helicopters were so close to the actors playing the hostages on the roof of the building. And that's when McTiernan went, like, we need to not take any risks here.
So John gets up to the roof and forces the hostages off after killing poor Al Leung. And we see Carl hanging there still to remind audiences that he's dead or isn't dead. And
also,
McTiernan on the commentary says that when you see Carl there, he wasn't sure if he got that right or not, having Carl hang there to remind us of what? Because if you're going to establish him as alive later, then surely this is telling us that he's dead a second time. So
it's about establishing geography as well at this point. Like, the one thing that this movie does really well is you always know, considering you're running around all these different locations in a skyscraper, you always know where you are, like, and where Bruce Willis is in relation to the roof, in relation to the party, which is great. And you know, the scene that you think is quite gratuitous, you know, when he runs past the pin up on the wall and twice, and the second time he like sort of kisses her boobs or whatever. That is just to let you know, okay, so you're back at the elevator shaft at this point.
So this is the moment when John McClane ties a hose around his waist because the FBI think he's a terrorist, so they're going to continue to come and blow the roof up. So he jumps just as the roof blows and the choppers fall. And Jeb Stewart, in his version of the script, said he calls this good news, bad news, is how this is written. So the good news is I've escaped. The bad news is I can't get through the window. The good news is I have a gun. The bad news is when I break through the window, the fire hose falls down and drags me down. The good news is I'm smart enough to remove it. So you keep having these back and forths. And D'Souza says he owes that scene, the way he wrote it, to Harold Lloyd, who did that fire hose gag before, but for real, rather than John McClane, who was doing it with stunts. So yeah, it's just one of those really memorable scenes, I think.
Yeah, and the roof blows, and then you get the helicopter crashing down the side of the building. A sort of slightly. When I watched it again last night, I'm like, the helicopter should have probably fallen down by now. It's sort of the building explodes, and then the helicopter sort of isn't there, and then just at the right time when McClane is sort of safe.